talking to you guys about cheerleading because there's a lot more to cheerleading than just standing there and chanting words. A lot of people don't even consider cheerleading as a sport, but it's actually one of the most catastrophic sports that there is. It's even more dangerous than basketball, volleyball, and football. Surprising, right? I'm going to be going over cheering, dancing, stunting, and how it all comes together for competition. The history of cheerleading by Varsity states that its roots is closely tied with footballs. In the 1880s, an all-male pep club from Princeton made its way to University of Minnesota in 1898. It was on a losing streak, and one of its students organized a group and led one of the first organized cheers. Women actually weren't even allowed to cheer until 1923, and it wasn't until the 40s where they came into large groups and started teams, and this is because so many college-aged men were going to fight in World War II. Lawrence Herkheimer held the first summer cheerleading clinic, and he developed the Herky Jump, the Spirit Stick, and pom-poms. I got this from Varsity Spirit Corporation. Cheering is not as easy as you think it would be, because we have to make sure that our words are very clear and that people understand what we're saying. And we have to try and not sound mad, and we have to make an exciting atmosphere for the crowd. And we have to make sure that all our motions are the same, and we want it to look like we're all one unit. We learn the cheers right away from the beginning of the season so that we can go right into other stuff. I'm going to talk about the dancing now, because we start on our dances almost right away because we perform at a number of different things. We perform at Back to Blue Jay Night, Homecoming, and even some other important games. We make the dances ourselves most of the time, but we only have so many motions, so to put them in a sequence that's smooth and unique isn't easy. And the motions are the same from the ones that we use in cheering, because we want to make them all look the same. Fast-paced dancing is one of the things that made cheerleaders need more athleticism when it was first starting. Now I'm going to talk about stunting, and this is all of the cheerleaders' favorites, even though it's the most hardest. Stunting is where it has 4 people, maybe sometimes even 5 if it's a difficult stunt, and it includes the back base, side base, and the flyer. The back base helps the flyer jump into the stunt and holds her up by the ankles, and the side bases support by her feet. And if there's a front base required, she'll hold on to the wrists of the side bases. There's multiple entries and dismounts, so they can jump in a number of different ways, and we can bring them down in different ways. The most common one is the sponge, and that's just where we bring our feet down. And a little more complicated one is the cradle, and we throw her up in the air and catch her in a cradle. And a full down is like the cradle, but she spins as she comes down. And that one's a bit more fancier, and we'll usually use it in stunt group. There's also the basket toss, which is really quick, but has high impact, because the flyer jumps in onto the side base's hands, and they just pop her up immediately and catch her. And she usually does a jump or a kick while she's up in the air. There's many variations of 2-legged and 1-legged stunts. If the girl goes over on one leg and brings her knee up, it's called a lib, and that's usually what you go into before you pull any other stretches. There's the arabesque, where you just put your legs straight out and bend forward slightly, and then if you bring your foot to your head, it's a scorpion. If you bring it to the side, it's a scale, and if you pull your leg up, it's a heel stretch. And heel stretch and scorpions is one of the most complicated ones to do. Back bases have to always be ready to catch the flyer, because she's easily falling 7 feet or more and can land with significant impact and get hurt. And so We have spotters for this reason also, but they can't always get there in time, so the back bases have to be looking at head and shoulders at all times. ActiveKids.com had an article about how cheer is the most dangerous sport, with the risk of injuries in wrists, shoulders, ankles, head, and neck. Back injuries are also common due to twisting and rotating in stunts, or lifting, catching, or falling. We have many rules that we have to follow to make sure that we don't get hurt, and we always have to be on mats when we're stunting, because cheer is one of the only sports where injuries occur more often at practice rather than competition. Competition is our ultimate end goal. It's where we go to state and compete with other teams from across the state. The main event that we compete in is the team event, and that involves all the girls on the team. We start off with a cheer, and then we go into our dance that includes stunting and tumbling. We get graded on our voice projection, our motions, the difficulty of the stunts, and the difficulty of the tumbling. Another thing that we compete in is in stunt group, and we usually send 2 groups. This is just where we do a sequence of stunts, no dancing or no cheering. And we have to make sure that our stunts are very sturdy, and we get more points if they're more complicated, and all that nice stuff. We also send a couple of our girls to compete in the jump off, where they go through rounds, and the judges will ask them to do a certain jump, and if they nail the jump, they'll move on to the next round. They grade them on the height of the jump, the flexibility, and if their toes are pointed. And we've had a couple of girls win this one. There's also the all-around, which is one that I've competed in for a couple of times. And it's where you tumble onto the mat, do a cheer by yourself, and then tumble off. And they'll grade it on voice projection, your tumbling, and crowd participation, because it's all about getting the crowd involved. So I went over cheering, dancing, stunting, and how they're all required in competition. And I have this sweatshirt, NDCCA Winter 2015. This was a winter competition. I don't know how well we did this year, but it's a memoir from it. I've been in cheer for going on 5 years and have led from past cheerleaders and led beginners and even won some trophies. And I hope you guys know that a little bit more about cheerleading. And if you want to see everything we've learned today in action, we'll be in Fargo on November 11th.
Don't clap.